For a Deutsch.
And I'm Barbara Menino.
And on this episode, we're talking trust. Trust in those that we engage to help in our business. Now, I don't know about you, Barbara, but I've had times over the years where engaging someone to do something in my business or maybe even with a coach, it's been scary and sometimes it can be costly, whether it's a one-time service that somebody's going to provide for me, like build my website, or it's ongoing that I'm working with them for months on end. But I've learned a lot over the years. I don't Have you learned a lot over the years when it comes to engaging someone to help?
I certainly have, and I agree with you that it's both scary and costly. And I'm thinking that in large part it's scary because it is costly. And as entrepreneurs, particularly solopreneurs, we have to be very judicious in how we spend our dollars.
Mm.
And so that can make the decision sometimes challenging.
Yeah, and sometimes I'm thinking, geez, if we could go through a process like they do when big companies hire employees and put people through the ropes and really analyze who they are, what are their character traits, we might wind up in better positions, but we don't do that as solopreneurs. It's what service do you have? The service that I need? How do you process it? How do you work? What's the timeline? We don't get into anything really about the person, though.
That's actually a very interesting statement. As you said that, I was thinking back to my corporate experiences and how the best companies that I worked for had really good recruitment processes and really good onboarding processes. I don't think small businesses have that.
Mm.
And I suspect it's because of a lack of time, a lack of manpower and resources. And so that can get us, I guess, into muddy waters. But as you said earlier, we're talking trust. So at the very least, we have to go through a set of mental exercises, perhaps written down checklists to
Mhm.
make sure that we're making the right choices. And the
Yeah.
question is, what constitutes the expectation um, to enable us to have trust of someone we would hire? Or conversely, to enable someone to hire you or me to fill a gap or a role in their business.
Yeah. Yeah, I do remember a couple of years ago, someone, that had contacted me, to see if I could help them out with something, was also looking for a virtual assistant. And just with talking with her, I realized that if I didn't help her to find at least some candidates, that she would be in a really bad place. So I offered to use my resources and to help find a few candidates. And what I actually did in that situation was I made up a questionnaire and put it out there. I forget where I started. Maybe it was in a Facebook group. I'm not sure. But I put out the description of what the person was looking for, everything. But I said, start with this questionnaire. And I had put in some questions to look deeply on how the person worked, asking, like, to find out if they were a problem solver, or would they just say, "Oh, I hit a brick wall. I'm just gonna wait for the client to tell me what to do," but there were several different questions that you normally wouldn't find, in a typical, application for something like that. But I would love to be able to use that also when I am looking to engage the services of someone, but I'm afraid all too often and I'm just thinking off the top of my head about websites that the service provider might just say, "Well, you know what? You either want my services or not. I'm not filling out a form to tell you about myself." What are you thinking of?
That's kind of interesting too, because once again, small business oftentimes doesn't have the processes, the rules, and regs that a
Mm,
larger corporation would. Though I've never encountered a response like that when I've asked questions of people who I was going to hire to perform a service for me. Um, I guess it could happen. It would be very off putting. And the irony of that is that answering those questions would ultimately pave the way for a better interaction and a better relationship as you go forward, because you had dotted your I's and crossed your T's on the front end. You had set expectations. You had expressed desires for what you
mhm,
needed. And the conversation or the ability to answer this questionnaire, let's call it that,
mhm.
would indicate whether this service provider could fulfill to your satisfaction or not.
Yeah.
So, what a great idea to hire
I think I'm
someone
gonna
and
start a
use that
movement.
tool.
Yeah, I'm gonna start a movement with entrepreneurs. It's like, let's start instituting some of these questionnaires, these procedures, and get people used to having to do that because we if we're spending money with somebody, we need to know a little bit more about them, I think. When you're looking at how somebody works, are they going to be available to you when you need them available? And I'm not saying that, oh, you have to be available at the drop of a hat, but within reason. Uh, but because I've heard over the years, I've heard stories of one service providers disappearing.
Oh, I've
Uh,
heard stories of that, particularly in the technology arena. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, disappearing, or, they disappeared for a while and then they came back again. It's like, "Oh, I was sick, I couldn't do," but there was no communication. So, why I don't know, if I was that service provider, I don't think I'd be offended to have to give a little bit more information about who I am, at my core of how, so that people know whether I'm a great worker or just take the money and run. I don't know. I know people ask for references. That's an easy one. But of course you're only going to forward the good references.
Well, it's also interesting what you say about a questionnaire. And um, for example, you mentioned how much access will you be given, or is the person a problem solver? And some of that is style. So
Mm,
you may want a service provider who is, let's say, always available to you. If you call that person, you want them to pick up the phone and be able to be on the phone with you for 15 minutes to answer a question if for whatever reason you're in a state of panic. Someone else may not want to reach
mhm,
out by phone all the time, may want to jot an email,
mhm,
or may rather work with prescribed meetings. So, something like a questionnaire, in addition to setting expectations, could relate to style.
mhm.
And what style does the provider, or do the providers that you're looking at and comparing, have that will align best with your personality and your way of doing things? It doesn't say the other person is bad. It just might be more comfortable if
Right,
one provider behaved or ran their business in a certain way to
right.
accommodate what you like.
Right, well, and you're exactly right, Barbara, because that's. goes to like all the business coaches out there, uh and somebody might have, you know, wanted to get somebody as a client, it didn't work out, and then the person went to somebody else, and it's basically the same information but a different, it's that some personalities work together and some don't, and it's with anything that we need in our business. And that brings up though. So this is more like when you really have the choice. But there are some groups out there, and I was a part of it years ago of a networking group, a referral group, and you're expected to give referrals, and then that kind of puts pressure on you to have to refer to those people in your group, or if you needed something that was in the group, oh, you're kind of expected to use them, but what if it's not the best fit for you or the person that you were gonna refer them to? That's a tough situation to be in, and that's why I left it years ago, because I didn't want that pressure of having to use the people in the group, even if I felt somebody else was better. Um,
You know, that is chapter and verse of a lot of the networking groups out of there. I've been involved as well. And over the years, when I've talked to people about joining networking groups, that is one of the big objections that people will have. Well, I have to use people in the group, and I don't necessarily want to do that. It's not anything. It's not casting any
mm,
aspersion
mm,
on any provider in the group, but maybe there's an accountant in the group and you have a long time relationship with an accountant and you don't choose to separate from that trust and loyalty to try someone new. That
mhm,
isn't an insult to the person, to your colleague in the networking group. It just is. Or maybe again, the personalities don't click, just as we discussed. So it wouldn't be the best choice for you. I do like to think, and yes, there is this tug of war, there is pressure in these groups, but I like to think or know that any member has to have the individual integrity to make choices based on what's best for them and not just because we're
mhm,
members of the same group. I think that's an important lesson for
yeah.
people who engage in this kind of networking and referral marketing, word of mouth activity.
Well, and it's everybody being involved, to standing up and putting on their big boy pants, big girl pants, and being an adult. And, you know, and I've heard in, other groups, oh gosh, I'm trying to remember where it was, and I've heard it recently about, there's enough business to go around.
Mm.
It's okay, to know multiple providers in one area, whatever, because there's enough business to go around. And, I'll resonate with this person, but I won't resonate with that person. It's human nature. Uh, so we just have to be adults about it all.
And that's a really important statement that you just made about there's enough business to go around. You know, we talk a lot about competition, and there's often discussion of how you can get ahead of your competition. I like to think that the competition is healthy. If you have the confidence to know that you're performing with integrity, you're putting your authentic self out there in the way you provide your services. You also have to have the confidence of knowing that there's another person doing the same thing who's good too. And it doesn't have to be a warring
Mm.
situation. It's just confident humility and the knowledge that there is enough business to go around. That's a very comforting thought and a good one for all service providers to remember, whether you're receiving service from someone or providing service to another business.
Yeah, yeah. I wanna back up a little bit here, and we've been kinda talking about, like, business that are established, been in business for a while, everything. When somebody's first starting out, you and I were both there at one point, and you're putting the pieces together. You're duct taping your business together. A lot of times the first thing people get is the website. Well, I should say maybe a business card first, then the website. And you're like, "Oh,
You need a URL to have the business
the
card.
domain."
I
Okay,
just
yeah,
said
you
that
need
to
the domain,
someone
then you get the
today.
website. Um, but where I'm going with this is that this is something else I've seen is that people trust service providers too much in the beginning to do the right thing. And then time goes by and they realize they don't have 100% access to their technology, to their software. I'll never forget years ago when a friend of mine, I was on her email list. This is in the very early days of my business when I was doing some email marketing for people also. And I always look at the bottom of the emails, like what provider are they using? Where did it send from? And I was shocked that her email for her business was coming through someone else's constant contact account. And I was like, "Whoa, wait a minute here. You mean to tell me that she doesn't even have her own email marketing account? The person who was doing the work for her was using their account to send the client's emails out." I was like, "Oh, this is not good because you don't have access, you can't get in there yourself to look at the emails that went out and see any stats or anything like that. If you needed to get in there and change anything, you can't get in because it's not your account." And the same thing goes with websites. When people have a website built and they don't have the access to the hosting again. Oh yeah, it was that same person years ago that lost access to her website because she trusted the builder too much, and she lost access to her whole site. As I this is, I hope our listeners, little sidebar here to our listeners, it's like, please, please make sure that you have access to all of your software, all of your applications. You own everything. Nobody should own any part of your business. Nobody should be running emails through their email account. Now, I haven't seen that in years. Uh, but you own it's your domain, it's your website. Have your own hosting account. But that just breaks my heart when I see, I mean, that really breaks down trust. I'm sorry. I lose trust in somebody when I see that's how they do business, and it's just wrong.
You mentioned you prefaced that whole discussion with what about when you're just starting out? And isn't that an important time? Because a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. You
Mhm.
don't know how to ask the right questions. Even if you had a questionnaire, it might not cover all the salient points. That's very, very interesting. If with a naivete, you could get yourself into some hot water. And I guess that the only lesson there would be that as you evolve in your business, how you develop more savvy,
Mhm.
how your business grows, your needs may change. And you use that as the platform to say, it's it's time for us to part ways because I need something more in my business now. And hope that if you've made some mistakes on the front end, you can extricate without difficulty and acrimony, actually, that you can have a nice shake of the hand or termination of a contract and go off to something new that's on the level at which you are right now.
You're absolutely right, Barbara. Let's all put our big girl pants on, big boy pants on, and be adults. And if somebody needs to move on, it's okay, right?
My friend Beth always talks about putting on your big girl pants. So so that's funny. The other important thing, and we've sort of touched on it, but haven't actually articulated it, is the need for communication
Mm,
and also to establish in writing what the rules of the game are. Just this morning, I was at a meeting and I heard about two best friends who were having dinner one night and decided they wanted to start this wonderful entertainment venture. They pulled out a napkin and drew up some ideas, threw some ideas down on this napkin, formed an LLC, referenced the napkin partnership in that LLC, and went on to invest a lot of their, if not all of their hard earned savings in a business. And when they finally got to working in the business instead of just dreaming about it, they realized that they had a lot of differences of opinion in how it should be run, how the place should look, because it was entertainment, the kind of entertainment they should have. And it ended up not only with the severing of a friendship, but litigation into the double digits or higher thousands of dollars. So communications in the form of talking it out, but then memorializing in writing through a contract that spells out all the details of the deal
mm.
is an imperative because you always have that piece of paper to fall back on when issues arise.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So again, with our listeners, if anybody ever says to you, "Oh, it's okay, we don't need an agreement," they might be okay with it, but you shouldn't be. You
Yeah.
should not be okay with not having it in writing, and confirm signatures. So absolutely.
That's
So
so funny. In my days in business, I've had one or two people who have said, well, we don't need it in writing. There are no protections. So, yes, listeners, beware of that deadly phrase.
yes. So I don't know about you, Barbara, but I would love to hear what our listeners think about this topic on trust and working with people and being a solopreneur and knowing that you're not alone. You know, we're all in there doing the same thing.
No, it always seems to come down, it's business. And so you make very rational decisions. But when you're talking trust and when you're talking even style of the kind of person that you might be attracted with, someone with whom you'd like to do business, there's a lot of very human components that go into your decision. So you have to think of the whole circle so that you make the right choice. And also, should you make a wrong choice, because mistakes happen, failures happen, having the confidence to know that you have the good judgment to figure out how to regroup and get on to a steadier path. So again, think about trust and how important it is when you're making decisions about service providers.
Soapbox Wisdom is sponsored by brand messaging and storytelling consultant Barbara Menino and business consultant Christine Rothdeutsch. You can find them at barbaramenino.com and Christine Rothdeutsch.